Thank you. Okay, so we're recording. We are looking at the agenda from, we didn't have a meeting in May, so this would be the April agenda. We did roll call. I'll just go through it again so Jen has it. Do you go by Jen or Jennifer?
Jen is fine.
Jen, okay. All right, so we have Amy, Justin, Jack, Rita, Falco, David. We do not have Brian, Chief Hawk, Brad, Carolyn yet, Matt Shipley, and Cynthia. Any public comments on the agenda items for the day? I don't think we have any public, so I think we can skip that. Oh, and Jack, who is that next to you? There's a person.
I'm Brian.
Oh, hi, Brian. It's really hard to see. You're like itty bitty there. So I just saw an extra person. Okay, excellent. So then we will go to approval of the meeting minutes from April 19th. Do we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
All right, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed? None. Okay, good. All right, so the only new business that we have on the agenda, and I realized that I wanted to add a discussion around timing of these meetings, but discussion of new voting processes. So by that, what I meant was, and for Justin's benefit, since he was unable to join us in the executive session, it's the voting processes, but it's more than that, right? It's the rules and regulations that we've been talking about for a few months now. So we did have a detailed discussion, I think it was last week, in the executive session. There are maybe still a few small wrinkles to iron out, and then hopefully we can move to vote on that today. That was the objective for this meeting. So I will, let me see if I can share my screen. Oh no, the host has disabled that. So maybe someone else can share. Or maybe the host can give me permission to share.
You have to do it now.
Okay. Try it again. Yeah, okay. All right, can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So this is the rules and regulations, which Falco had a great description, which this is the ordinance is the bones of what we as the personnel board need to adhere to. This is the flesh, the filling out the bones of the ordinance. So to David's point, we probably will also have to make a change in the ordinance, depending on if we move forward with these changes here by vote today in our formal meeting. But let's do that first, and then we'll see what follows from these changes that needs to be changed in the ordinance. Okay. All right, so a lot of these changes are wording, just making it, instead of commission, we're calling it a board. So I'll just scroll past those. Oh, there's a spelling error there. We can fix that. I mean, it needs to be cleaned up, but we're agreeing here on the ideas, I guess, and then we can play with the text to make sure that it's cleaned up properly. Town of McCandless board, these are just minor things. I'm going to keep scrolling. Okay, so this is changing these changes here in 2.1a are saying that we're basically updating to match what we currently have, which is 5 members, not 3. So again, nothing new here, but this paragraph here is new. So what this calls for, and we didn't talk about this in the executive session, we talked mostly about the voting, but this basically says if there is a vacancy that we will ask the alternates first, and then put it out for the public interest, basically. Is that? Have people had a chance to look at this? Any questions about this section?
I think I asked it before, but what is the tenure for a new person?
Oh, that's a good point, Rita. So up in this paragraph here, paragraph A, to serve for the terms of 2, 3, and 4 years. So if we were starting this board from scratch, the initial members would be 2, 3, and 4 years. However,
You mean you just assign that to a person coming on, year 2, year 3, year 4? I mean,
If you were starting this from scratch, you'd have to, you
have
want
to do that,
people
yeah.
to start
just
so that
five of them.
it's off every, yeah.
Okay, that's-
Yeah,
Yes, so right now our terms are 3 years, but you see this highlighted thing here, so that was for a point of discussion. I was suggesting maybe make it 5, so there's less churn, and more consistency in members, and we could get more done, but that's, I don't feel strongly about 3 versus 5. So right now it's 3, to answer your question, Rita.
Thank you.
How do
yeah, and I
people-
think that might also be in the ordinance itself.
Yes.
And that would be one of those things that whatever the ordinance says we have to live by, which I know we're gonna go through all the changes, but something occurred to me that is, I'm assuming that kind of at the end of all this, we can either approve the changes and then have Falco go through for kind of a legal reading.
Yeah,
But the one thing we may want to do is just add, and Falco, I don't know if you were probably already planning on this, but add like a savings clause at the end that just says, if any provisions of these rules and regulations are in conflict with the applicable town of McCandless ordinances, then the terms of the town of McCandless ordinance controls, or, you know, even though that's in fact the case, it's always good just to kind of have that savings clause in there.
yeah,
Yeah, and I would agree, and since we're still looking at a draft today, we would make the motion to approve today, subject to the final review and approval of the solicitor, so that I can go back through and make sure that I am reconciling it with ordinance provisions. There is, under Rule 1 of Section 137.05 of the ordinance, a section that talks about the terms. Of course, they're appointed by council, and it says to serve 3-year overlapping terms.
Oh, okay, so the ordinance says 3 years, so that's what we can, and if we wanted to ask council to change the ordinance, I think that would be kind of a separate wave then. You know, I think
Yeah,
we do the changes now that we can, and then,
Why can't we apply it to us? Why can't we just follow their rules?
we can leave it 3. My.
oh, yeah, but I'm speaking generally, if there's anything that we want to recommend to council, you know, after going through all this, if there's anything we want to recommend to them, you know, I would just say that would be a separate process. You know, we do these all in line with the existing ordinance, and if there's anything that, you know, we would suggest to them to change, that would come after we do, you know, we get the changes that we want that are in line with the current ordinance. That's all I'm
Oh,
saying.
see, I was thinking sort of the opposite, David. I was thinking that based on our discussion of the scoring in this document, we would have to change the ordinance anyway. So let's look at it all with fresh perspective and say, hey, we're gonna be asking them to change the ordinance anyway. Let's do.
These changes would not, for the scoring, would not require any changes to the ordinance. After the executive session, I had backed out those changes going to a 200-point scale. And so this is back to a 100-point scale. And at least I think that any changes in this document that are proposed to the scoring system are in line with the McCandless ordinance.
Oh,
And so that 200-point scale thing would be part of that second discussion if we wanted to recommend to town to change their ordinance. But the scoring system in this document, I'm 95% certain is all consistent with the existing town of McCandless ordinance.
Okay. All right, well, any strong feelings about 3 or 5 year terms?
I agree with Matt Shipley's comments as far as I believe a longer term would be warranted, especially since after speaking to Chief Hawk regarding as far as our hiring practice over a period of time, we hire very slowly. And therefore, by the time somebody in the board gets enough reps or they get used to going through the hiring process with candidates, I think that it would be maybe brand new to them if we had a brand new crop of board members.
Yep.
So based on that, I support 5 years.
Ditto on that.
Yeah, and I agree, but for this document, if the ordinance says 3, I would want to keep this document as 3 and then put the 5 years on the list to go to the town with, you know.
Understood.
And I'm not trying to push this. I want to be clear. What I'm saying is I want to pass these rules and regulations now with what we can. And then as kind of phase 2, change them if town is willing to, change something like this in the ordinance, but not wait for changing the ordinance in order to get the changes done that we can change now. So I don't want to make it seem like I'm trying to hide. That's what I want to do. Like that's my position is I
And
think we
remember
should
that-
do the changes we can now. And then as a second wave of changes, ask the town, hey, here's, we were thinking of 5 years instead of 3 and a 200-point scale instead of a 100-point scale. So
Remember-
that's just my view.
This is Falco. There is a process that the town goes through to adopt an ordinance, and that would prolong the time for these being effective because that's at least a 2-month process to advertise and then to finally adopt something. Plus, of course, the discussion leading into that with the drafting and the confirming. So you're definitely looking at probably a 2 to 3 month process before you would have those ordinance changes, and then you would have to revisit these rules and regulations to match them up against any new ordinance provisions. So it definitely would add to the adoption of these rules and regulations.
Right.
Okay, so we'll put this on the docket for future changes. Let me move this out of the way so I can see.
Would it be possible to write those up so that if it's in this, that it says that, or by terms set by the town of McCandless Council? That way, if it changes later,
Yeah.
Okay.
in fact, this document.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And we should still note that we're thinking 5 years for what we can go to council with our, with our thoughts. But yeah, I like that idea to just change the language to be, as provided in the, whatever the right legal wording there would be, as provided in the town of McCandless ordinances.
Yeah, we can definitely do that.
Okay, and then this part about considering the alternates first, I guess that might be in the ordinance, but in general, do people agree on that idea that it makes sense to have the alternates move in as full-time members before going to the general public?
That
Yes.
makes-
Yeah,
that-
I don't, oh, sorry, go ahead, Rita.
Do they have to appear before council though, again, if they're alternates? Do they have to go before council and get approval again?
My
Um,
understanding is they don't but that's just my understanding off the top of my head. So,
Okay.
Well, to be
I-
appointed a regular, member, they would.
Yeah,
oh, okay.
I thought.
yeah, they currently do. This is saying, hold on. Town council shall consider in their voting, so it does say they do have to, town council still has to vote on it. We didn't change that. If the alternate is not selected, it basically just says they have first priority. Yeah, before we put it out to the public. So if we have 2 alternates, then town council can vote on those and then put out to the public the position of alternate. Okay, so
Hmm.
let's move along, because this isn't really the meat of what we want to talk about, but it's good to get some agreement there. This is some. Oh, okay, so instead of being specific about when we're meeting, we're saying once a month. And that's the agenda item I wanted to add, which is to talk about some dates that might work for everyone, because this standing meeting doesn't work for Matt ever. And it's challenging for me from a work perspective to try to fit in, so we can do that later. We took out the part about the secretary. To my knowledge, we've not ever had a secretary, so this is nothing new.
Renumber things because you eliminated 2.6.
Yeah, good point. There's a lot of cleanup here. No annual report required.
And you can always, to make it easier, you can always, like for a section that's deleted for 2.14, for example, instead of trying to renumber everything, you can just put in brackets deleted or reserved or something like that. So you don't have to go through and update all of the cross references and everything like that, because that can be a pain.
Okay, good to know.
I can also have my secretary do that at the office.
Rita,
Okay.
wanted to ask you, or
Amy.
Amy, wanted to ask you, 2.7 where it says shall be notified in writing. Do you want to add email, by email,
Sorry, where is that?
and clarification? On 2.7, it says shall be notified in writing. Does email count as writing?
Yes, I would say so.
Okay.
2.7, hold on.
I don't see it.
Falco, would you agree?
Be notified in writing, yeah. There.
Yes, email would be considered in writing.
Okay,
Thank you.
yeah,
I have a question on 3.7, section 2. When we get there. It's page 14.
yeah, I think this was all here, okay.
Just, I saw Matt's comment and I just want to get clarification on that as well. It's implying that we do background investigations for essentially for all applicants, which would be costly as well, right? So my understanding was the top 3 selected candidates as well. Are we doing it on all, or are we just?
I think if my memory is right, I want to say that this section is copied straight out of the ordinance. I'm not sure about that. So that I think that's one of those ones that we would have to go to town to, to change.
Mhm.
Falco, I don't know if you know that off the top of your head. Is this straight out of the McCandless ordinance?
I have the ordinance in front of me. What section are you referring to?
3.7, section 2.
Yeah, 3.7 with the background investigation that basically requires a background investigation of every applicant. Instead of, doing a background I agree with the sentiment that I think we should only be doing a background investigation on, the top 5 candidates or whatever, your top 3 plus a couple extras. And certainly at least not doing it on anybody who doesn't end up making the cut at the end of the day. But I think this language may have been taken straight from.
Act 57, yeah.
Yeah. Now that I look at it, not even the town of McCandless ordinance, but Act 57.
So the question is, can we just say on leading applicants versus on all applicants?
Yes.
Well, we do have to make sure it's compliant with the ordinance. I also vaguely remember that the chief had said something in terms of the practice of the town in conducting these, that they do hold off until they know who are the list of eligibles. So you're probably looking at, and this can be confirmed through the chief, doing the background investigation on all those who make the eligibility list, not just the top 3, because as as the town hires, individuals can move up into being in that qualified pool. So I believe he said that the background investigation is conducted on all those who make it through the written and oral examination process.
So one thing I want to bring out though is background's age, right? So as we do let's say for instance, we do a background check on all 30 applicants, we have applicants for a role. 2 years down the road, we're going to have to recheck. So,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So it also gets into those are lengthy, right? Because these aren't just basic as far as I'm running background, you know, via system. This is, you're actually interviewing people. So I think we need to talk about this when this is maybe an offline executive session or an additional session where we get into details of what that is, because this feels excessive.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm thinking it should be something like Justin, what you're suggesting is like a rolling.
Yeah.
You know, like, okay, we do the top 5 so that we have the 3 plus a couple extra. But then if we're gonna not resubmit the list, but if the town is gonna turn back to the list at some point during the 2 or 3 years that we're making it effective, those background checks as we knock people off the top will just be rolling to, you know, to stay like 2 candidates ahead of who town can consider or something.
Right. Well, so maybe this is part of the step 2, change the ordinance.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what it's gonna fall under. And to be honest, I don't even know if I don't know how much of that comes directly from Act 57 itself. This might be something we can't even change, but it might just kind of be a, you know, I don't know. That's something that we'll have to kind of have a executive session conversation about, because I think that would probably take some legal advice on that one.
Okay.
Folks, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Ryan Hawk. I'm able to jump in here for a few minutes before my next commitment. You're all right. Falco remembers correctly. We do hit the top candidates and do a full background on them, you know, anticipating how many we might hire and present to council for consideration. So we do not do every eligible candidate who passes that initial written unless or until we get to the point where we foresee them getting an interview and moving further in the process. And then to Justin's point, if we have a period of time that, you know, goes between when we do our initial background and when we think we're going to reconsider that candidate again, or we will freshen up that background check, that background investigation.
And if I'm correct, we never see that. We're not privy to that background. That's just for the police.
Yeah, Rita is remembering correctly as well. There's some, you know, criminal justice information as backgrounds where we provide a nice review of things for council.
Right.
I believe we might provide some basics to the personnel board before their interview with the candidate.
Yeah.
But, yeah,
Most of it, I mean, it should be in the application.
Yep.
Some of it, because if they're honest, they're putting it in there.
oh, absolutely, yeah, and overly so in some cases. They don't take it.
Yeah, general standard is it's either a go or no go when it comes to a background, and that we would just need to know if it's a go, essentially, as far as need to know. And just for everyone's edification, I'm here looking at 57. It just says that a background check needs to be completed prior to employment.
Oh,
So,
okay, perfect.
So yeah, we would satisfy that as far as just doing the top ones. So that as far as it's
Okay. Good. So then it's just
Yeah,
checking against the town of McCandless ordinance and so that could be either now or phase 2 when we ask for ordinance changes.
Yeah, and speaking to that issue, I have that amendment to the ordinance. It unfortunately does start off by saying upon receipt of an application
Okay.
in one of the that were adopted. So that phrase would have to be revisited then to match more what the current practice is, as well as what we're discussing right now.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll put that on the phase 2 cleanup list. Okay, so again, nothing substantive here until we get to 60/40. That's hasn't changed, even though it's highlighted. We talked about, did we want to change it? I don't think we do. Okay, testing. Okay, it's final score. So here's the meat of our discussion. So go ahead.
Hey, Amy, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Okay, I just wanted to point out one other real small typo, and that's 35E. We have to go back. You have MPOETC. It should be MPOTEB, and it's listed in a number of places. You changed the last word from commission to board in E, 3.5E. So it's just a clerical thing.
okay, so let me see, let me find it once. Where, oh, here we go. Okay, so add a comment. It should be what?
MPOETB for board instead of commission.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And then you have it listed a number of places.
Okay,
Just do a word search.
thank
Yeah.
you.
Sorry.
No, that's good. Okay, so final score. So David, that's good clarification. I hadn't realized. So you put this back to 100 points.
Right. So I put
Phase
it,
two.
it back to 100 points, but it's still, so the main change will be that it's that forced spread, which should be, let me see, I have my red line open. Yeah, the details of that will be down in section 3.13. So really in section 3.10A, that's a new section just to make it really clear, you know, how the final score is calculated, but it does not change the scale from 100 points to 200 points. But that's in order to do that, I think that's a discussion for like Falco and Steve Corbel to have as to what would have to change in the town ordinance to allow that change. So that would be another one for, you know, changing from a 100-point scale to a 200-point scale would go on that list of stuff the town has to do with the ordinance. But this just shows the step-by-step for 3.10A, section 3.10A. That's just the step-by-step of getting to that final weighted score. And once that's in, if we shift to a 200-point scale, it'll be a lot easier to, you know, to change that final score calculation instead of having to go to multiple parts of the rules.
So I feel like we've had a lot of discussion about this the other day. Any other questions? Or Justin, I know you weren't able to attend. Any questions, comments on the
No, I'm
weighting?
comfortable.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I did change the minimum score from 60 down to 50. Again, I'm up for whatever people think. And then to Rita's point, you know, going into the future as part of phase 2 or phase 2A, at least me personally, I would be totally open at looking at a very defined rubric instead of a minimum score. But I think we need either a minimum score on the scale. I think we need a minimum score on the scale until we have that defined rubric. You know, meaning, for example, when can you search somebody's premises? Okay, if the applicant mentions probable cause, that's 2 points. Search warrant, that's 2 points. You know, that's the kind of rubric that I'm thinking of in my head if we do it. But until we have that really defined, you know, this concept is worth this many points for this question. I just think we need to have a minimum score in there because remember, almost all of these people are already law enforcement officers. You know, so to have somebody say that they score a 0 out of 100 or a 10 out of 100 is just not very defensible.
Exactly. The rubric is justification to the score. You can't give a 0.
Yeah,
Rubric and you have specific things you're looking for, and then you can question any 0, number 1. And number 2, the more people that are there, the better the outcome, the closer you're going to get to the best candidates, because it's inevitable that if you have 5 people judging the candidates, the entire group of us, but you should never have just 2. You need at least 3 to 5. You have to have an odd number. It's just the way it should be. But that's my opinion.
Yeah, agreed. And it's written a minimum of 3, ideally all 5, or maybe even some of the alternates would participate to get more than 5, but yeah. So, and then this is back to, okay, so we eliminated that because that's step 2, the 200 points. That's consistent with what's above.
let me just check one thing.
So 3.15 background investigations, it does reference as far as the top applicants. So we just need to get, it sounds like the ordinance to match the language up and the language up above to change to match 3.15. It sounds like that's like a phase 2 situation, but we're gonna have to either change the language. Well, it sounds like we'd have to change the language in 3.15.
Yeah,
You know
Well,
what I mean? From level of
Right.
consistency. So if the driver's the ordinance, the town ordinance, and it says all applicants, then we need to stay with that until we get to that phase 2, where we change that, because this is actually referring specifically to, as the chief, has named essentially the eligible applicants. There's a certified list of 3, right? So this gets to what we actually do in practice. And this needs to change,
Now-
unfortunately.
the other thing we could do with that is leave it as is and then include the savings clause at the end, kind of anticipating that the town of McCandless ordinance will be updated. Because the savings clause would basically say, okay, 3.15 as written is not consistent with the town ordinance, so the town ordinance controls. But then as soon as the town ordinance changes, 3.15 is fine. So if we didn't want to try to go through, make all those changes, and then in 3 months change it back if town changes the ordinance. And to be honest, as a lawyer, it makes me cringe to do it that way. But if we're expecting that change to go through, it might save kind of a lot of work, a lot of a rework that we're just going to end up undoing.
Yeah, I know, and I hear you, and I agree with the spirit of it. Like, if we're gonna approve this document,
Yeah,
we need it to be accurate, right? And like, believe me, David, I completely agree. And we're gonna have to undo this in 3 months, and that's frustrating. But I think for us to match what's on ordinance and what it is right now, I think we have to.
yeah, no, I agree. I was trying to talk myself into not doing it.
No, I hear you, man. I hear you.
So,
And this is
We don't
always-
have to have the language doesn't have to be super extensive, right? I mean, we can essentially just match what's up above.
Yeah. and Falco, is that maybe something that you can handle, is just kind of making sure 3.15 is drafted in a way that's consistent with the ordinance as it stands now, and maybe just save this language in another document somewhere for future use?
Yes, we can do it that way. And, I don't think there's anything wrong with having that savings clause in there per se, but ultimately, as changes are made by town council, the rules and regulations should be revisited to make sure that they're matching any future changes. I think we also have to remember, this is your very first rules and regulations, so it's taking
Right.
time to develop them just because they're for the first time. Now as we move forward, as adjustments and tweaks are made through the ordinance process, it'll be much easier to simply just mirror those in the rules and regulations, submit that document to council, have it be approved, and you're on your way. So I think the process will move much more smoothly as changes are made in the future.
Yeah,
Yep. Okay,
And speaking of that, I want to go back and I don't know if we've crossed past that in the draft, but let me get to that section. I think it was section 312 and the sentence that struck through. There is a clause in the current ordinance, I think it's section 205, that does say that you interview the top 12. I don't
Oh,
think we
okay.
can, and in fact, I think that sentence is almost a word for word from that section of the ordinance. So again, I don't, and I know it impacts also the veterans' preference and so forth, but again, until those changes or adjustments are made in the ordinance, I think we have to include that sentence still.
Falco, it actually didn't get deleted. I just moved it from 312 down into 313. Because
Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah, so that one I didn't delete, but because it says who you're administering the oral exam to, I thought it fit better in 313 than it did in 312.
I see it right below there now. Okay, I got more concerned with the deletion than seeing it right underneath there.
Yeah. No, as soon as I looked at it, I was like, wait, why would I have deleted that? And then I realized I just clicked and dragged it down to the paragraph below. So that change, it's the same exact sentence, everybody. I just moved it from written examination to oral examination because it talks about who you're going to give the oral examination to. That's all.
yep, makes sense.
That's great. That's fun.
Okay, so where were we? Let's see if there's anything else. Oh, duration of eligibility list, where was that?
I think that's that high. Oh, no, it's not the highlighted part. There it is.
317.
3.17, yeah. We were suggesting 2 years versus 1. Takes such a long time to do it that it seemed to be more reasonable to keep it for 2 years.
Definitely agree.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I like the ability to extend it by an additional 12 months as well.
Yes.
Because that gives, because all of this stuff is such a process, not just for us, but then for town council. And if they start running up on the 2-year deadline, we always have the option to say, okay, we can extend it for a year to accommodate council's
No.
process.
Yeah.
We don't have an ordinance outlining that. Is that correct?
I believe that's
Correct.
correct.
That was one of the things that was missing in the ordinance. Yes.
Okay. And I'm going to bring this up here in a later moment after we get to this document of why I'm asking that specifically.
Okay, let's just see if there's anything else of note.
Hey, Amy,
Yeah,
if you go back a little bit to 3.14, let's flip over the second page right above 3.15, right before the highlight is deleted. It says applicants claiming veterans preference shall be submitted satisfactory proof of service and honorable discharge therefrom with this application form. I think it would probably be good if we could include something a little bit more detailed, like they need to supply a copy of their DD 214 copy 2. And what that does is that'll indicate what their discharge is, whether it's honorable or less than honorable, et cetera, so that will exclude people from getting written letters that aren't accurate, et cetera. This is the real deal. This is how you vet veterans.
It's a good call out.
okay, so tell me the wording again.
A DD 214 copy 2. And every veteran has one of these. They need it for all their benefits, so they all have it.
Would they send that in with their application?
They would give you a copy, yes.
With the application, so we would see that with the
Yes.
application. Good.
It's very basic. It has the branch of service. It has, I think, their MOS, and then it has as far as the nature of their separation. If it was honorable, dishonorable, medical, general, whatever that might be.
Okay.
Okay,
Then the only thing I'd say to that is however we solicit the applications from people, just make it clear upfront. You know, if you are claiming veterans preference, you need to turn this form in with your application. They
Yeah.
can always supplement it, but they need to turn it in basically before the interviews, you know, something like that, but. You know, that's more of just letting them know. You know, I don't know if we have like an instruction form for them or something for their application.
Yeah.
With added
Okay.
background, veterans are very used to doing this.
Yeah.
So it's a common practice.
Okay,
All right, so I think that was yes, that was the rest of the meaningful changes. So process wise, if we can vote today that we agree with well, maybe we don't need to vote. I don't know. If everyone agrees with what's written here, I don't think we can vote on the actual document until we clean it up and make sure it matches the ordinance. So maybe it's not a vote, maybe it's just,
I mean,
we're all,
I think we could probably vote on it subject to council's review. And then that way, next time, we're basically only voting on council's red lines. You know, so we vote on it as is, subject to council's review. And then next time around, we don't have to re-review the whole thing. We would just be reviewing council's changes.
we can do that, but then there's an intermediate step, like, I'm not gonna send it to Falco, like, I think one of us, and I'd be happy to do it, has to go through and kind of clean it up and make sure that, you know, the comments are recorded elsewhere, because the comments about like, okay, this goes phase 2 need to be removed and that sort of thing, so. But that's fine, if Falco, if you're comfortable with voting on this cleaned up and then subject to your review, that would be okay with me.
Yeah, I just want to have you consider what's in the ordinance right now as far as these rules. It's section 104. It says the Personnel Board has the power to prescribe, amend, and enforce rules and regulations for the purposes of implementing the provisions of this article, which would be the ordinance that's in place right now, and the Home Rule Charter. Then it says, before any such rules and regulations are implemented, the same shall first be approved by town council. No changes shall be made in these rules without approval of town council. So that's the language that we're operating under right now.
Okay, so once we get a final set of these rules, we have to put them to town council to approve.
Correct. So I think let's go back to then where we were with today and what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to get to a clean, it's because when it's sent to town council, it's going to be a clean document with all the red line accepted, deletions, you know, removed. So we have a clean document for their eyes. So right now we're still in the process of making those adjustments that we've discussed today. And then I'm assuming that I'm hearing that that's going to be done by Amy. She's then going to send that to me for my legal review and making sure it's consistent with the ordinance. And then at that point, we have a document that this board would be giving its seal of approval to send to town council. Now, are we trying to accomplish all of that then in one motion today, or are we doing it partly, I guess, today, and it's still drafting phase, and then revisit this in July? I'm not sure how the July meeting is going to shake out with vacations and other things.
Would it be possible for us to do this asynchronously with outside of meetings as far as the drafting and getting the draft over to you? And then maybe go to an executive session for the formal vote to move it to council and something of that nature, or how? What's the
Yeah,
order?
and again, I guess to some degree, this goes back to one of Amy's comments in the beginning of this meeting, which is, when is the next meeting going to be? I mean, we're not necessarily, and I'm not sure how town council has advertised these personnel board meetings, but if we have some flexibility in setting the next meeting and we have a completed draft that can come back before the board for an actual vote, we could have the meeting scheduled in 2 weeks, so that we don't lose a whole month, if that's feasible.
I know I will be out of town and unavailable in 2 weeks. I'm going on a 2-week international trip, so.
Not do, looking at it online and voting by online, by email. I mean, I want to see. the whole
Well,
thing before I vote, and
this,
go ahead.
the vote has to be done at a public meeting because it's actually votes. We can't do it in an executive session or outside the eyes of the public, so to speak. So we would need to call a meeting that's been advertised as a public meeting.
I mean, so I would say, I think I agree with Falco and Amy. You know, if we just give kind of the thumbs up, if anybody has any major problems or changes that they'd like to make, let's talk about those now. But if we can just kind of, without voting, just give the thumbs up for, you know, for this document to get cleaned up and then go to Falco with the expectation that we would vote at the next meeting to accept the changes and then submit them to town council for approval. I mean, that would be my thought process. I don't know what other folks think about that.
Is there a way to do it like the way that you described, David, today, Falco, so that we could say, we all agree in theory with this, it needs to be cleaned up, you need to review it from your legal perspective, and then we have the final version and send it to council before we go back and vote on the final version? Or can we pre-approve it, or is that not possible?
I think we can
It's,
vote.
I think,
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Falco.
no, I think the answer to the question of how council wants to act on this, because it does definitely require their vote of approval. You know, are they willing to vote basically on the draft or give us their input on the draft before you vote? Do we have our council liaisons on the call, or is anyone here from council?
Yeah, both Jack and Carolyn are here.
What is their sense?
I would say for time's sake, I'm gonna guess the council would rather just see the final product than reviewing it and then probably having to review it again.
So our vote at the next meeting would be for us as the board to, you know, to approve the minutes for the rules from our end as being the version to be submitted to town council for approval. You know, so
I'm gonna ask a devil's advocate question here. Do we have to vote as a personnel board on what we're sending as a draft to council to opine? If it's not the final product?
what I'm
Well,
saying is
from
we
our-
come up
from
with
our
our
perspective-
final product. Like we say, this is our
Exactly.
final product. And then it's up to town council to go through. If they want to make changes to it, then it's on them to make the changes.
Follow, gotcha. I mean,
And
I'd like to
I would
move as
agree with
quickly as
that.
possible in this. I mean, so.
Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, I think everybody knows where I stand on it. And like I said, I'm out of the country for a couple weeks, but if an interim meeting that can get a quorum, I don't mind being left out of the voting meeting. If you know, as long as everybody's on board with it. If you guys can set up a meeting without me that where you could take a vote on it. You know,
Just being aggressive by saying next week, can we do this? You know, by next Friday,
Maybe, yeah.
because if we could do this within have a week turnaround, because what I'm seeing is a lot of this, and everyone here did an excellent job as far as making their edits and whatnot. But what's wonderful is everyone did it in Word, and it's pretty easy to accept changes and then just do the final cleanup on that language. And then once that's done, then we get together, do a really quick review, do the vote, the public vote, which then I suppose to require us having that notice published in, what is it, 24 hours? 48 hours?
Yes,
uh,
Yeah,
ahead
no,
of time.
20
So
24.
24. So, yeah, and then maybe shoot for next Friday if we can. You know, try to get before people will start taking their vacations and the holiday week coming up.
So
Yeah.
let's talk about that briefly because I have a 10 o'clock meeting, so we're running out of time. But in terms of what works for most people on the call, like I said, I know Wednesday mornings almost never works for Matt anymore with his schedule. Do we like mornings? Should we move it to evenings? What are?
I would like to move it to evenings. Mornings
Uh,
are.
I'm unequivocally evenings better
Okay.
for me too. They're not even a close, like, I mean, I technically block this off of my work calendar every time we have a meeting, and
Yeah,
I'm always nervous, like I'm gonna get some meeting call from a vice president or something.
yeah. Okay, so evenings, how about Tuesday evening? I'll just throw that out there. Or is there an evening that works better for people?
I am open to any evening during the week. So whatever works for everyone else in the board, I am completely comfortable with.
Yeah, the only ones that I keep open are the first and third Thursday of every month. I go to the MTSA meetings too.
Okay,
I take that back. Thursday nights I can't do. My kid are start hockey. So
Okay,
every other night I can do.
so Tuesdays, what does Tuesdays work for Rita? How about Jack and Carolyn and Chief Hawk? What?
Is there any
we want
chance
them?
I'm looking at the town calendar because I'm also trying to make sure we don't have other meetings on those nights. Like we have the third Monday that's open. We have the third Tuesdays that are open. You guys said Thursdays don't work because Thursdays are fully open. Would any of those days work? The third Monday or the third Tuesday?
I'm okay with either of those.
Yeah, that'd be.
we,
I like
Mon-
or Tuesday.
I think the biggest one might be Falco's schedule, because I know he's pretty
Yeah.
full.
Yeah, the challenge has always been on Mondays because unfortunately we have many of our clients like to meet on Mondays. So my Mondays are pretty jam packed. Tuesdays I have meetings the second and third Tuesdays of the month generally. Sometimes they shift those based on election days and other holidays. But generally it's I'm out the second and third Tuesday. So the first Tuesday and the first and fourth Tuesdays are usually clear.
The fourth Tuesday would work per the town calendar. That's completely open.
So fourth Tuesday evening, is
Yeah,
that, I think that's good with me.
And what
Sure.
does evening mean to people? Is that 5 o'clock, 8 o'clock? What?
Like
I want to be
6-ish?
respectful too to Chief Hawk. I mean,
Yeah.
What-
Let me just check I don't
Right.
think I have a recurring Tuesday evening meeting. No. So I mean, Tuesday realistically, I'd prefer more like 6, but like maybe 5. Chief Hawk, I don't know how long are you usually around in the office? Like if we do it at 5, is that gonna hold you up a lot from other stuff you have to do?
I think if you did it at 5, I would still be able to maybe manage up here if we need to do it for folks who want to be in person. I would say if you go much later into the evenings, I would just ask you folks if I could host it virtually then. Because I'm always on the move. It might be not too much information, but it might be from a softball field or a basketball court, but I can host it anytime. But if you did it on a Tuesday evening or whatever evening at 5, that would probably be more conducive to me holding an in-person option for people. That's all I'm saying.
I'm cool with 5 p.m. So fourth Tuesday at 5 p.m.
sounds like that's coming to consensus. Rita, haven't heard from you. Jack, Carolyn, 5 PM.
I'm
Yeah.
fine. Can someone check with Matt?
Yeah, I can do that. Okay, so next steps, I'm going to clean up this document, recirculate it. I'll see if we can get like a 15-minute meeting next week, perhaps. We can do that via email, but then for the ongoing maybe we can meet next Tuesday, even though maybe it is the fourth Tuesday of the month. Anyway, And then going forward, change this
Yep.
from Wednesday mornings to Tuesdays at 5, assuming if, hopefully that works for Matt. Otherwise, we're back to the drawing board. Then we're gonna have Falco look at it from a legal perspective. We're gonna have town council review, and then phase 2 is we look at the 200-point scale, as well as the lengthening the term to 5 years, the background check piece, only doing that on top applicants, and whatever else we determine from the ordinance we'd like to do.
And the rubric, we need to do the rubric, but the rubric is part of the questions, and we don't include the questions in this. This is, I mean, that's a totally separate document, and, but the rubric needs to be developed.
Yep. Agreed. And that's something that council doesn't need to vote on. So it's not necessarily phase 2 for council,
Right.
it's phase 2 for us.
Yeah, that's our phase 2 internal.
Yeah.
And then the only other thing, because Amy, I know you have to go, is just, it sounds like we're all pretty much in agreement on principle. The one thing would be just, until we develop that rubric, what do we want that minimum score to be on that scale? Like I said, I'm open to suggestions on it. I don't know what other people's thoughts are. I just put 50 in. I'm fine with 60. I'm fine with 40.
I think we said on the executive session, 50 seemed to be the general consensus.
Okay. I didn't know if we reached kind of a consensus on that or not, so.
Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but
Sounds
I
good.
think
I
most
apologize,
people did. I did not, but most people did.
apologies, folks. I have a hard stop.
okay, me too. All right, thanks, everyone. I guess we will, I will call for the meeting to be adjourned. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Hi.
All right, thanks,
Amy,
everyone.
just let me know by email. Just keep me updated by email, because I